So I was asked to give just a little bit of an overview of the economy and where we've come from. As Anthony said, this is a little bit about telling the story. So I thought I'd just start with a little bit of the background and the history of our economic development strategy. So this was a strategy that was put together by stakeholders within the city pretty much 10 years ago. This came at a time when our economy was not as it is today. You might remember we had large-scale manufacturing in this city. We had the likes of Fisher and Paykel. We had a lot of meat processing companies. We had Cadbury's. Remember Cadbury's? So when we pulled the strategy together, our economy was changing, and those that were looking at the economic future of our city could identify that there was a bit of a change occurring and wanted to put some actions in place to look at what they could do about that. So we got the University of Otago Polytechnic, the Otago Chamber of Commerce as it was called at the time, the Employers Association, and both Runaka together and said, actually, what are we going to do to make sure that we create jobs for the future? And our job growth was 10,000 new jobs and $10,000 worth of GDP. Our city hadn't had that growth for a considerable period of time. And our aspirations were to look at what the city's strengths were, to focus on those strengths and really try to identify where we could grow new opportunities for the city. It's not an easy task, I can tell you. I was going to explain a little bit about the difference between economic development and business development, and you'll see from this slide, and I do apologise, a bit of it is hard to read, but I'm aware that you will get these as notes as well. But business development is where you look at improving the individual performance of a business, and that's driven by profit. It's focused on markets. It's often the creation of new business, and it originates generally in the private sector. So that's about building capability. It's the stuff that our banks, Business South, a lot of other organisations do to build capability within individual businesses. And it's incredibly important because without strong businesses, we don't have a strong economy. Without strong businesses, we don't have employment opportunities. But there is a flip side to that coin as well, and that's the area which we call economic development. And economic development is a bit different. It's driven by job creation, but it's looking at how your place, how your city, in the case of Dunedin, can grow a whole new sector. And Anthony, who's one of my colleagues at Enterprise Dunedin, is going to talk about an example of this this morning around the Centre of Digital Excellence, which is where we've been growing a whole new sector around computer gaming, and you will have read and seen a little bit more about that, so I won't talk too much about it. But it's long term, and it takes time to develop new sectors and new opportunities, and it comes in partnership with your community, in particular those businesses that are able to grow those new opportunities. So we set out with those goals that you read earlier, the 10,000 jobs, $10,000 worth of GDP growth. They're nice to put on paper as a strategic goal, but actually we have hit them. We are pretty close. If you can read these statistics here, our GDP growth between 2003 and 2013 grew only about $3,000 per capita, so it wasn't really very much. In the last 10 years, we've grown close to the 10,000 mark. And what that means is more wealth in more of your family's pockets. Every household individual is wealthier as a result of economic and business growth. And our employment jobs, I guess that was the other goal that we had. And if I've got a few minutes left before the bell rings, I'll just give you my thoughts on those two measures. But they were the ones that were put into the strategy. Our job growth has been, again, significantly ahead of the previous decade. Now, these two measures are important because they do give you a bit of a feel for how your economy is going. But what is really important, I think, and more important than these metrics is our community better off as a result of the economic growth that we're seeing? And so I'm seeing at the moment a really big transition from what we'd see as that traditional manufacturing, the exporting our products internationally, to much more of a tech, a focus on those skills that are going to be, I guess, a bit more of a weightless skill for our economy. There's a really big transition in the areas around health, education and administration. We're seeing really strong growth in our university and health sector, and I expect that that'll continue to grow. Those manufacturers we have got locally are specialising, and they're becoming really niche in what they do. And you just have to look at some of those companies that we have in our community to understand the transition that we've had from a labour-based economy into one that's looking at how we can grow some of that intellectual capability within our firms. So yes, whilst GDP and employment figures are really important, we've got to make sure that translates to a better quality of life and a better standard of living for all of our community. That's me. Thank you, Mike.